No problem, no problem. So we are live on Facebook and YouTube and of course Zoom. We are welcoming to the stage Sajed Naseem, CISO for New Jersey Courts, Howard Israel, virtual CISO for Mandiant FireEye, Deborah Lee Farron, Information Security Analyst at Eastman Kodak Company, Jim Rutt, CISO at the Dana Foundation, James Dawson, Advisor to the Head of IT Business, Risk and Controls Office of the CISO, Danske Bank. It's a pleasure to welcome you all there. In no particular order, I'd be interested, maybe, Sajed, could you give us an overview of how your role has changed? Before we get into the topic of the CISO of the future, let's address the elephant in the room.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. So basically, I'm the CISO for the New Jersey court system. And many people, the way that they understand courts is when you walk in, there is a jury, there's a judge, there's attorneys, then there's a plaintiff, a defendant, this kind of idea here. Some people may understand the courts where they get a traffic ticket and they're annoyed and they have to go pay it or whatever it is. So that's, entry one. There's even minor, things, where sometimes you will get where somebody's dog, went to the other yard and, something happened there and then there's, a fine, some sort of civil thing. But then you think of bigger things like criminal trials, right? Somebody is going to jail for, some criminality. In addition to that, a couple of years back, we had a case with the NFL in terms of betting in New Jersey. It was a big time case that we had, from the Supreme Court area. So you see all a variety of different cases. Now, all of those operations have been going on historically in the current format for 100 years plus, right, in the way that the courts work. Come March, come February, when we had gone to, when we learned about the COVID situation, within 6 or 7 days, what wound up happening is about 10,000 employees went completely remote. A court system that's 100 years functioning internally like that, where you walk in and is now virtual. And within basically a few weeks after that, we started holding virtual court proceedings. And although there's lots of areas with that, but I'll give you a basic thing. I was on several Supreme Court committees in New Jersey about things related to virtuality, right? When you're in a virtual box like this, and how do we get justice? What role does technology play in regard to getting justice? And I'll give you one anecdotal example. I had an intern on a call, and I noticed that in one of his video platforms, he kept showing up #1 on the screen as #1 circled. And I said, hey, how did that happen? And he said to me that that he noticed that I noticed that he was playing ambient music in the background. And so he was #1 on the screen by playing ambient music in the background. And I'm just making a note that historically, he would have been in a court, behind a judge in a monolithic looking building, and now he's #1 on the screen. Could that have an effect in the way that he gets justice? Could he be seen in a better way, in a worse way? These kinds of questions are there. So basically cybersecurity, not getting hacked, not getting Zoom bombed, the virtual presence is now a cybersecurity topic. So the topic is of cybersecurity and justice in this modern world. And I think they're directly and indirectly connected in some ways, but we can get into a lot of that. Yeah. So that's really been the significant change. So our systems to us and our connections like this in this virtual space is absolutely essential.
Perfect. And that's how we've got representation from the public and the private sector on our audience. Yes, James, how's everything changed for you over the last few months?
Yeah, I just wanted to say in the introduction, I mentioned, good morning, gentlemen. Thank you, Deborah, for joining so we can say good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Also, it's nice to see some diversity on these panels. I am no longer at Danske Bank as the IT risk advisor. My contract ended there, but I cannot speak obviously for Danske Bank, but I can give examples where, as Sajed just said, there is real human aspects to cyber control, IT risk, and being a CISO and managing CISO risk. The fact that the entire case could be affected by the fact that someone's on Zoom, or you're managing many important matters through third parties that have gone through all your risk assessment and everything that you need done, but they can be having issues too. And in the time of crisis, I was on the COVID response team for the bank. On the time of crisis, we put very talented other people, put 22,000 employees on VPNs. We had to increase our capacitors, etc. And from the risk side, we saw a lot of risk, increased risk from DMARC, DKMI, where we saw spoofing and phishing increasing, of course, and that's very common in the time of crisis. Whatever the crisis is, you're phishing that crisis. So that was a very common aspect, a human aspect, and I hope that Sajed and the rest of the panel speak to some of the human aspects, because I found that is, and those of you who've heard me on CyberWire and other places, that's what I preach. It's all about what people do. It's not about data, and it's not about technology, and it's not about how skilled you are and how knowledgeable you are with your tech.
No, great sentiments, great sentiments. Deborah, has it been about the people these last few months? What's
definitely. It's you can throw as much money and technology as you want to make everything secure and limit your risk, but the bottom line is it's down to the people. It's how we behave, how we train our colleagues, our employees, and I agree with James that a lot of it is the phishing right now. That's really the biggest threat vector that we have to deal with. And if our people are not aligned with what they need to do to protect their data, their company, right there, the old saying is technology, process, and people. But at this point, I think people is at the top of that pyramid.
I see. Very good. PP and P on the pyramid. Howard, does that reflect your last few months? Of course, we want to look at the CISO of the future in the context of the MSS, but what's been happening for you?
So life in my world is not changed a whole lot in particular, because I work remote a significant amount of my time supporting my customers. But certainly from my customers' point of view, life has changed. Just the way that everyone else has just discussed. Everyone is working remotely, and the risk profile as a result of that obviously is increased, because we have staff using company equipment, laptops, PCs, etc., and they're not necessarily going through the more secure environment of the firewalls and threat detection systems, etc., that's on-prem. They're connecting out directly to the internet, in unsafe space. So it's a little bit more of a challenge. The risk profile obviously has increased a bit, but we just, have to step up and mitigate to the best that we can, and do our best to educate staff. Phishing obviously continues to be a major source of problems and headaches. Number one threat vector, as mentioned. So, it's a little bit more of a challenge, but it hasn't been particularly difficult.
Okay, that's positive. Jim, has it been more positive for you?
Yeah, I think from an enterprise perspective, we were fairly prepared for a disruptive event like this. We had been 100% cloud for the past, I'd say, 6 years. So, the transition from a technological perspective was quite easy. I think, and everybody previous to me has kind of touched on this, the cultural impact is one of the things, given the disruptive nature of this event, was not totally anticipated. Obviously, we have a heightened awareness of attack vectors coming from social engineering, phishing, and the like. I think what it's done for us overall is just elevated our readiness, our preparedness for a heightened state of awareness. We're performing a lot more due diligence in terms of our mitigating controls on all of our cloud environments. But it's more or less standard operating procedure over the past couple of months as we've gotten acclimated here. One of the things I've been hearing a lot from peer organizations is the fear based on the rapid migration to some cloud services, and the awareness that they may not have the proper controls in place, or that the existing controls they had prior to this event were not sufficient. So I think, it's spurring on a whole new discussion around, how do we right size those controls, to move forward in this new remote world.
Well, hopefully a hybrid world. I don't know if it's going to be all remote, maybe.
I don't know.
What do you think, Sajed? before all this working from home and COVID, we were talking a lot about automation being part of the CISO of the future's role. A lot of sparkly boxes coming your way, you know, please buy my AI solution and so on. But what actually should the CISO of tomorrow seek to automate? You know, COVID aside, what is it we should get back to looking to automate?
I mean, this is a very challenging question. And I don't think it's one right answer for any organization. You're going to have to. I think the biggest thing that I look at is what are we trying to accomplish is really always the question, right? What are we trying to accomplish with automation? If there's some efficiency if there's some operational efficiency, for example, that you're doing something manually, you're running a program manually, and you need, you know, 3 people to go run it every day, replace tapes and all this other stuff, you know, and you can do it differently and more effectively, great, okay? But at the same time, you know, I also think on the same problem, like, you know, somebody's replacing tapes, now you are, you know, now you're up in the cloud, now you get a ransomware, everything is automated now, so ransomware will be automated right to your cloud as well, right? So there's that one difference there. So you're gonna have to think that through. At the same time, in terms of automation, I definitely think we should be in a world that is, even right now, I think that there's a lot of alerts that CISOs see in their SIM and their security monitoring that really are not understandable, right, to a regular person. And how do we know that? Okay, how do we anecdotally know that? We know because there was a Verizon breach report that came out a couple of months back, and 31% of breaches were misconfigurations, meaning engineers doing it, in essence, right? In addition to that, if you looked at the Marriott Starwoods breach from a couple years back, you had analysts that looked at the alert in one of the systems, the SIM, and said it was a false positive. So what did it mean that it was automated, got something, and what did it mean now exactly, right? So you've automated something, so you're getting a bunch of information, but does that mean anything to you, okay? So I think you need to figure out what you want it to mean. So the way that I approach it is the following. Take the top 20 issues, whatever they are, ransomware, you know, phishing, you know, I think phishing is one, love scams and all that, business email compromise, take all of those, right? Understand what they mean operationally, right? Can your analysts understand the information that's coming to them and then put it in that language they can understand? So I'll give you an example. One of the things we looked at is all of these ransomwares are going around, okay? So one of the key things about a ransomware is once one organization gets it or somebody gets it, there's something called an indicator of compromise, as an example, okay? So what we did is we automated putting in indicators of sound compromise into our systems now. So now if you see it anywhere, now that means something. And we say Maze ransomware. We don't say, you know, indicator of, like, we try to keep the words very basic, because if you have an analyst at a different level at different times of the day, then they need to be able to clearly understand what they're dealing with and clear procedures how to deal with it. So things like that I think are important, because the automation has to be connected to the understandability.
Okay, understandability, utility. James, what do you think?
I was going to jump in there and just say real quick, Sajed, that's right. And when you look at automation, it's always my recommendation that you look at your mission critical processes, whether you're a bank, a bar, or a hospital or whatever, and you only automate where there's very little human interaction. Everyone knows that data goes through unstructured to structured and then back to unstructured form in almost all processes. And those mission critical processes, if you're going to add automation, do it when it's structured and it's in technology. Also, if your third parties are going to add automation, they should make you fully aware of it and everything, so that all of your risk protocols, your controls, aren't affected by the automation and perhaps don't work. So that's a really important that you have in your contractual relationships with your third parties, whether you're the processor or the controller of the data, that, you know, we're going to agree that we're not going to add any automation just to appease our other clients, you know, many clients, and, you know, not make you fully aware of it and make sure that it doesn't affect your controls. That's the problem with automation. So those are the two risk areas that I see. Keep it in the structured data, high technology area, not in the unstructured endpoints where humans are involved. Although I agree with Sajed about having redundant processes where fat fingers can be involved. That's a good place for automation on the human side. And then make sure your third parties alert you if they're going to add something cool and neat in automation or in AI to their product or service.
So Deborah, let's touch on that. I'm sure you get lots of solution providers knocking on your door saying, "Oh, please, mine is the best, the most automated, the most AI, the most ML." But are many of those solutions actually just really good reporting mechanisms, so you can present data rather than anything else, or is that too simplistic?
I think it depends on your environment. The automation definitely does need to take consideration the processes, the controls, and as already been mentioned, what's the human factor? If it's a situation where the process is vetted, that it's not going to have much human interaction, then definitely automation is a good thing to have. But if you bubble up automation to provide, for instance, a dashboard for your C-suite, I have to say that it's important to understand, for us to have an understanding, and also the C-suite to have an understanding of what the automation means in the reporting process. And also, the automation needs to be adaptable to your environment. If you take where I work at, where manufacturing is a very heavy predominant area, versus another, which may be telecom, you're looking at two different types of automation. Or environments to be automated and what you're looking at for your risks. So you definitely have to be in a situation where you can determine that one package is not going to fit every single environment. That's one consideration. So adaptability. And thirdly, again, you have to take note of your processes. Are they vetted? Are they vetted to be very structured, or are there going to be human elements involved?
Okay. What about you, Howard? Human elements actually involved, or is it automation the actual goal of all of this?
So I think the answer to everything in the future is around automation and doing things faster, quicker, more accurately, with less human involvement and subject to less error. And you'll find MSSPs, that is a lot of their operational model, is the only way that they can achieve scale is via automation, right? Doing as many things in an automated manner as possible, whether that's collection, for example, in a SIM, collection of events, scanning them, assessing them, prioritizing them, and making intelligence out of them. Humans can't look at tens of thousands of events a day and gather intelligence around that. It's just impossible. So without automation, we can't scale. And everything is getting more and more information, more and more data. And the challenge is good automation. So actually making intelligence, as I noted in the question from Mike on the Q&A, turning data into intelligence is really the hard part. A lot of places claim to do this. I have some doubts in certain situations. Some places seem to do it better than others. And there's definitely some gaps in that space. So, but that is the direction we're going. AI maybe is part of the answer. I know it's being sold as the answer constantly, but I'm not entirely convinced we're there yet in terms of really, really good capability with respect to AI.
Okay. So Jim, who is tomorrow's CISO in the context of all these third-party solutions that may or may not be AI? Where should the CISO find themselves?
Yeah, I think, the other thing to address with the adoption of any kind of automation is the cultural impact as well. I think if AI is brought on into a shop to induce efficiency with existing staff as opposed to being viewed as a replacement for staff, these are the kinds of quicksand areas where adoption can face some kind of bureaucratic resistance. I think I agree with what was said before, where we have just a ton of data, plenty of opportunities, particularly with false positive type events, to use AI or use some kind of automation to reduce the manual intervention of these types of events. But we've seen a lot of solutions, such as like SOAR solutions, that kind of grind to a halt in some areas because the impression is upon the staff that are putting them in, is that it's there to replace what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, which is not true. It's just there to enhance whatever efficiencies can be wrought from those existing areas. So it's a very careful walking a fine line when we look to bring on these types of solutions, because it may not have the desired effect that we wanted, when we first looked at it as a purely efficiency increasing initiative.
Okay. So Sajed, is that ultimately what the MSS CISO relationship would be, an efficiency increasing relationship or initiative? Is that what you see, Sajed?
I mean, for sure. I mean, we want that. I mean, but one of the things I'm going to say is, when you're, when you have a problem, you pick up 911, right? That's what you do, right? You have a problem, with your dog, with your cat, with whatever, right? Medical issue, what have you, you can pick up 911. That is the relationship that human beings have had in this country for a long period of time, right? And so the question really is, when the CEO has a problem, who do they call, right? Really is the key question, right? And in this virtual world where we're in now, right, and with all the climate, the political climate, everything that's going on, I think with the virtual world, you want to be on the CEO speed dial because events these days are virtual. So to me, that is the relationship between the CEO and the CISO. I think that that's where the direction needs to head, because again, everything is virtual. So how are you going to know even a physical event unless you understand what's happening in your access systems, your physical access systems, your electronic access systems, what's happening, okay? In terms of the relationship with the vendors, for sure, I mean, you want to be efficient. One of the things I am going to say is that, when you're doing organizational security yourself, it's different than when, you outsource that. I think there's always something lost there to an extent, okay? And it doesn't mean you don't do it. It just means where do you do it? So I think that the efficiency part of it is key. I do think that if you're having a hired gun, you're hiring a company, you need to hold them accountable to the SLAs, and that they need to be tightly defined, right? Meaning they're not just gonna just forget about you during those circumstances. I think those things are key. I have seen relationships where they're there, you're sort of sending your SIM alerts to them, but it doesn't actually work, and you're not getting the same thing back that you're expecting, okay? So I do think the efficiency there is absolutely essential, but I think primarily as a CISO, you want to be the person that somebody is calling once there's a problem, meaning they trust you enough that that's what you're bringing to the table. That means you need to be connected with the human side of the organization.
Okay, no, I like it. James, is that your vision of the CISO of the future as well?
Yeah, I kind of like what Sajid just said. I think of the relationship between the CISO and all the other C-suite in any organization as kind of like a diplomat and a keep it simple person, a keep it simple and short person. The KISS rule is what I like to apply and recommend to be applied. With third parties too, when you get a third party that's supporting a critical process of your institution, make sure you go and find a keep it simple person at the third party, so that you can help explain to your C-suite why, or any decision makers in your organization, why they would use the third party or need the third party in simple layman's terms. Oftentimes men and women are on boards or in the C-suite, and even though they may have a technology quote unquote title, even the CISOs in some cases, older CISOs to be honest, they may not get all the new current technology, particularly third-party technologies they might not be familiar with. So make sure you go and find the KISS, keep it simple and short, person at the third party. And as Sajid said, make sure that the CEO and everybody else in the chain understands in layman's terms what it is that the third party is providing in managing the risk profile of the organization.
Yeah, and so James, so to that point, and I'm going to say this, is that we're in a virtual world. Nothing physical is going to happen without a computer connected to it some way, shape, or form. So even the police are relying on GPS information, cell tracking information, but these things are going through IT systems, basically, right? And so the reality is, who's going to understand better in terms of what is happening virtually than the CISO, right? I mean, that's a blunt question, right? Now, in this virtual world, you're not going to have even a criminal activity happening without GPS being involved, without some tech, digital information being there. So the CISO needs to rise to the occasion and connect as a person who is responsible for other people's security during this time. That's a key role.
And a communicator of that.
Organization. Yeah.
And a communicator of that. Someone who could convey that information not only within the courts, but within the attorneys, the defendants, and the prosecutors in those cases. But in any organization, the CISO needs to not only be the defender and the knowledgeable person, but he or she needs to be able to explain what's going on and how technology is being affected and what the risks are in that technology, particularly the cyber risks, which most people don't understand. I mean, all of us know on this panel, cyber risk and cyber technology is only 20, 30 years old. That's it.
I also mean physical risk, because I'll tell you what, we've had situations here where somebody's under threat. They come to me behind the scenes saying, tell me all the things that are going on the internet about the threat that's coming, right? You see, so there's involved in physical risk, right? But I think the CISO needs to understand that their virtual sort of cyber risk that's there is there, but it's connected to human lives, the business being functional, A, you know, somebody not getting hurt, B, right? C, the business, growing, right? So these things are all involved within that space. So.
Yeah, and it's all about people. Excuse me, Pelham. It's all about people. You know, it's all these technologies, all these complicated things happening. Lots of men and women who need to make decisions around the complicated technology. And if you keep it simple, if the CISO can keep it simple and keep people informed, then it's going to be much, much better from a risk profile and from a cybersecurity profile.
Well, conscious we've just got a couple of minutes. Howard, what do you think the MSS CISO relationship should be like? Because evidently you look after the in-house security, of course, but you know, FireEye is, you know, an MSS stakeholder. So how's that relationship going to work?
So that actually is a traditionally, I believe, a very difficult problem. The CISO, the security team, must understand very, very clearly exactly what they're getting from their MSSP, right? What their role is, what their responsibility is. And I'll be honest with you, I believe a lot of times there's a lot of misunderstanding about that. In particular, sometimes the security team thinks that, well, the MSSP has this as their task or there's their function. I don't have to worry about it anymore. It's not my problem, it's their problem. And I believe that is very much incorrect. I think you have to look at the MSSP relationship as this is an extension of your staff, and you have to treat them like that. That means communication is necessary both ways. You have to reach out to them, and you have to make sure that they reach out to you, and you have to make sure that that communication occurs on a regular basis, because they are in fact working for you. So you have to make sure that you get the value that you think you're getting from them, that they're doing what you think they're supposed to be doing for you, and that you're reacting appropriately, because they can't do everything. Some things that they'll be doing actually rely upon things that staff inside the organization need to back up and support as well. So I believe the communication problem is a very, very serious problem and often is overlooked. So you have to look at that very, very carefully. Expect ongoing communication, excuse me, between your staff, your CISO, and your MSSP. It's not a hand off and forget about situation. It's a constant interaction.
And I feel we're going to hear more about that very same communication topic throughout the day. Just very quickly with your brief concluding thoughts, Deborah, and then Lee. Deborah, and then Jim.
Fundamentally, what I'm hearing, and I agree to, is that the future CISO needs to straddle both technology and communications, relationship building. Without that understanding of both how the business strategy is directed and what the technology needs to be used to address the risks that are associated with that, it's a moot point.
All right, fantastic. And Jim?
So, to wrap kind of up what everybody else was saying in terms of that relationship, it's always primary responsibility versus ultimate responsibility. I think any kind of outsourcing arrangement does not absolve you of the ultimate responsibility for that arrangement. Now, from a justification or in terms of being able to take that data and then translate it to the board, I think, One of the key things is we have to align the way that we present that data in a language that the board is already familiar with. Most boards are very familiar with other types of risk, particularly around general fiduciary risk, accounting risk, et cetera. We have to kind of align that language in cyber, which is a little less mature, and put in the same terminology so that it can be consumed properly.
Fantastic. Well, I feel this is great. This is a great opener for the whole day. We could go on. In fact, we could probably make this panel do the entire day. But we are out of time, and I'd love for you to give us a virtual round of applause for our fantastic panel, for Sajed, for James, Deborah, Howard, and Jim. Please give everyone a virtual round of applause. Someone found the virtual applause button the other day, so thank you very much. I will start off. Ira says well done, and I'll add to that. Fantastic. Well, I look forward to seeing you as active and loud participants. Ellie gives applause, which is really good. We've not worked out the virtual clapping, but I will see you all throughout the day, and please be vocal members of the audience.
So we attending fell by as attendees later. We don't come on as panelists. That we drop off now as panelists.
That's right. I'll move you back to the world of the attendee. So
thank you very much. What a good panel there.